Chapter 6, it's your ethical section. So it talks about the ethical codes and legal practice, professionalism, and excellence. Your ethical codes is what we are bound by, a way of directing our behavior, the way that we make decisions. There's multiple ethics about different things. We're going to go over those. It starts on page 120, and it talks about the 5 dimensions of your ethical codes. One is possessing adequate knowledge, skill, judgment, and character to practice competently. So that one's talking about that ethically, you don't do anything that you're not trained to do, that you're not competent and skilled on doing. Number 2, respecting the dignity, freedom, and rights of the client. Sometimes it's really hard to respect, and it's really important to know that that is part of our ethical codes, is that the client has the right, always has the right to make the decisions for themselves. It is not our place, never our place, to tell them what decisions to make. They have the right, the freedom to choose. One of the reasons that you don't want to ever get into the advice giving type style of treatment is you're not the person that has to take responsibility for those choices. Number 3, using the power inherent in the professional's role responsibly. There is a great number of ethical violations, if you want to go look them up on your state website, where you will see abuse of power. Remember that no matter how hard you try not to see that power differential in a session, it is still there. You are the professional, you are the therapist, and you can influence someone. Number 4, acting in ways that promote public confidence in the profession. So this is basically like how you're viewed, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, your reputation. It's all a part of your profession. And the last one is placing the welfare of the clients at the profession's highest priority. As we go through here, you'll see that a lot of these are based upon the ways that we protect people, and they're built to protect people. So why do we have them? Because it promotes professionalism. Our ethical codes promotes us to be more professional in the way that we behave. It also allows us to deal with ethical dilemmas. There's a lot of times you're going to come across something you're not going to be quite sure what to do or how to do it. And using our ethical codes sometimes will help us decide on those ethical dilemmas. It's also designed to protect the consumers as much as it is to protect ourselves. Your next section is your law and ethics. You have criminal law, which is the federal and state governed law. You have your civil law, which is a violation of a statute. And then you have your liability, which is where your liability insurance comes into play. It's where you've caused harm and you're liable for the person's pain. One of the things that you want to know about the criminal law and liability and the federal regulations is that if you violate laws, if you violate different laws, you can have major fines imposed upon you. Now, one of the things that you want to also think about when it talks about on page 123, it talks about peer control. One of the things about the regulations and how they come to be is the fact that we are a self-governed board. So the practice of counselors, social work, they have their own governing board. We also have our own governing board. That is really important because how we self-govern is much more, how we self-govern is very important for us to maintain that way. We don't ever want the ability taken from us to be able to self-govern. Now, there are going to be times when you are working somewhere that you've got these ACA code of ethics, and then you've got your I think I've got it over here. You've got your ACA Code of Ethics, you've got your legal and law type things, and then you've got your agency regulations. It's always going to dwindle down to where you can or cannot do something, whether it's legal already or even if it's not against ethical codes, just because your agency doesn't allow it. So an example for that is in Virginia. When I worked in Virginia, the law said that I was competent enough to work with a population of sex offenders. Ethically, I was not practicing outside my competence, but my agency did not allow that. They had a special person, special program that they referred anyone for sex offenses to. So that is how that dwindled down. And you always want to know where that is. The principles of our ethics are autonomy. I'm going to tell you what page those starts on. On page 124, autonomy. These are the 6 main principles of a therapist. Autonomy, which means that you are allowing and you do allow your clients the freedom to choose their own path. Non-malfeasance, do no harm. It's just that simple. Do no harm. Beneficent is to promote good, justice, to be fair and just. Fidelity. Fidelity speaks to the keeping of your word. So one of the things fidelity might really talk about is someone, and if you have really bad time management skills, always causing your clients to wait, canceling appointments and rescheduling, that's actually against fidelity. You should be there for the people when you say that you're going to be there for them. And then the last one is veracity. And veracity is just being honest and genuine, just being fully truthful, not being deceitful with your clients. The next section talks about the codes of ethics. They help you with, why we have them is they help you with your ethical decision making. They provide the ability for best practice and ethical behavior. And it also provides us guidelines for our professionalism and to protect others. So that's a little bit of a repeat of what we already talked about. That's the specific stuff that it's talking about on page 125. And then you go over to 126, and this talks about the different areas. If you look up the 2014 ACA Code of Ethics, these are the 9 categories that they cover. So in the counseling relationship, you're going to find things that's discussed as guidelines under the counseling relationship of like dual relationship, what is okay and what is not okay, confidentiality and privacy, of having to have signed releases, a need to know basis, even when a release is signed, telling a person as much as they need to know, professional responsibility, what you're responsible for, and also your relationship with other professionals. So like if you work in a team and how much you talk to a psychiatrist or a teacher, those type of things. A lot of people that I've worked with work in school-based programs, and a lot of times they say that they struggle working within the school system because a lot of times the teachers will want to know, maybe a teacher will want to know more than they feel like that they should tell a teacher. And that's exactly what this is talking about. Just because you're working with the kid together doesn't mean that you get to tell somebody what all happened in session or what's going on with that kid. That's still confidential. How we handle evaluations, assessment, interpretation. Things in this section would be like, you only do an assessment if it's purposeful. You never do it for just busy work or just to be doing it. You always have a reason for your assessments that you give someone. When you have an evaluation, those are things that you really want to think about when you do an evaluation or an assessment, because you also, if you complete it, you also have to be able to interpret what you've completed to that client and tell them the results. Supervision, training, and teaching. There's sections in there in your ACA Code of Ethics that talks about the regulations for supervision, the relationship for a supervisor and a supervisee, as well as training someone and the teaching of the programs. Ethical codes also addresses when training how it has to be like CEUs or CUs. You might have heard those acronyms, which is units that you have to have for your licensure, and how you receive training and get those trainings approved by the boards, either APA or NBCC approved for them to count. And then the other section here is teaching. So even as an instructor and teaching someone about the field of counseling, there's specific regulations under Code of Ethics that apply to us. Research and publication, you've got points in there for like IRB approval, special populations, doing no harm in your research, distance counseling, which you can imagine has really changed. And right now, there's more flexibility with distance counseling than there's ever been. And then resolving ethical issues. You have specific steps for resolving ethical issues. Even if you're at a point of licensure and you're no longer required to have a supervisor, you never get past a point to where you can't even at least use a colleague to kind of process through ethical dilemmas. And then you have your ethical decision-making model that you can also follow. When one of these are violated, depending on the severity and the harm to the client that it caused, the violations can result in just remedial requirements, which is maybe taking some ethical courses, training in specific areas of competency, and then also probation. So you can go on probation where and a lot of times if they do probation, they'll also do probation and remedial. And until you have met all those requirements, you won't get on probation. But they can also suspend your license for like a year or a period of time. They can also remove your license forever, that you can never get your license back. So remedial requirements, probation, suspension, and expulsion are violations if you break the ACA Code of Ethics. Now, if you break legal laws, state laws, federal laws, that could also imply fines and jail time. Okay, and then the last section, which is your ethical and legal issues, competency and scope of practice. This really pertains to the fact that you should not be providing services to anybody on any level that you were not specifically trained on. So if you've not took any addiction courses or been trained when working with the addiction population, then you don't provide addiction services. If you've not done any therapy that involves some type of play techniques, then without supervision, you do not do those techniques. So you have to be competent in the services that you're providing. The second thing that it talks about in your text is informed consent. Your informed consent is probably one of the most important things that easily gets breezed over. Your informed consent is supposed to have components in it that protect you and the client. On page 129, it begins talking about your informed consent. It's one piece of paper that when somebody starts therapy that they need to know about your fees, what your competency levels are. There's a little bullet point on page 130. I'm just going to go over the top things of that, but you also on page 131 you have a example informed consent that you might want to review. The requirements in an informed consent should be the nature of treatment, including the purpose, goals, techniques, and procedures, the limitations and potential risk. So anytime that we have somebody in treatment, we need to let them know that this could be hard, that there's risk factors involved, and if there's any side effects to treatment, the role of that technology will play in treatment, the time parameters for the sessions, what the fees and the billing arrangements are, your no-show cancellation policy, limitations on confidentiality, qualifications, and your credentials, your roles of if you're under supervision that they need to know that, they have to know that. They're required to know your supervisor and your supervisor's contact information, and the continuation of services if something happens to you or you're not available or you die or you become incapacitated. What is the procedure for them to continue therapy? So those are some things that are required to be in informed consent. And then the next section is confidentiality and privileged information. It's really important for clients to understand their confidentiality. Things about confidentiality that we really want people to really understand is that we can't always promise confidentiality 100%. If we get subpoenaed to court, if they are at risk of harm to themselves or others, we need to be able to tell them what things will cause us to have to break confidentiality. So confidentiality pertains more to the client and the session and their files and paperwork, where privileged communication falls more under the legal aspect. And privileged information refers to what should be disclosed in like court hearings. One of the things that needs to be understood about both of these is if you're running groups, you cannot promise each of your group members that somebody in that group is not going to get out and talk about it. And that has to be part of that informed consent, that confidentiality is implied, but you cannot stop someone from going out and talking that's a member of that group. And so under privileged communication, someone in the court that's subpoenaed to court can have a conversation about what they witnessed in group. And those are things that clients need to understand, that you can't really control that kind of stuff. And then most of us should be really familiar with HIPAA, which is how we store files, store documentation, keep our paperwork safe, use computer technology. And then we have our next section, which is protection. Part of our ethical and legal issues is we have to be able to break confidentiality if someone threatens risk to self-harm or threatens risk to others. So if somebody says that they're going to hurt somebody else or hurt themselves in any way, neglect, abuse, those type of things, we have a protective factor. Now, you need to check your states, but in most states, if there is elderly abuse or child abuse, you always have to report that. But in most states, you do not have to report domestic violence. So those are things that you want to, again, check under that umbrella. And then the next one is boundaries. It's very important for us to keep our professional boundaries and be respectful and understand that there is an implied power that we have with our clients, and keeping those boundaries is a way that we protect them. Letting them get too close to us and then can cause them pain. That can cause a client to be hurt in some way. And then technology, the use of technology is always scary for people if it's not their norm. So any way that you use technology, any way that your agency is okay with it, your regulations are okay with it, those are things that needs to be discussed with your clients so they know how technology is applied. But that we will get to a point where people are a little bit more comfortable with technology services, or one would think anyway. But that's about all of chapter 6. And